Cali, Oregon Hood content here. We're going to go over a bunch of topics, so let's get right into it. It's a lot of history. So, in 1781, 11 families were sent by the Spanish rule that had taken over the Aztec Empire to California to capture that part of the territory, because California yet was still indigenous. They hadn't captured it yet. So those 11 families in 1781 built what was called Los Angeles. And that's how Los Angeles was founded. It was later taken by Mexico in the Mexican Independence War with Spain. So now on to President Lopez. President Lopez told his men that he wanted to be eating breakfast in Texas. So that night, him and his men slaughtered a whole city, women, children, everything. It was known as the Alamo. Well, fast forward some years, he's wanted this whole time by the United States authorities for his act at the Alamo. Well, he's the president at the time the Guadalupe Treaty signed. Now, himself did not sign the Guadalupe Treaty. It was 3 Mexican representatives. He overseed it. They signed it. But if anybody knows anything about Mexico back then, the president's in control. Even sometimes, all the way up to 2000s. The president is all the way in control because of corruptions and different things. So what's magical about this is that when he signed this treaty to sign over all the states, the Mexican people weren't backing him on it. They did not want to give up these states that they had won during their Mexican independence from Spain. That was not something they wanted to do as a people. So he sold all these states and signed the Guadalupe Treaty. And they're going to say, oh, well, he didn't do that to get rid of his being wanted. But after he signed that, he was no longer being pursued by the United States authorities. He went into what historians call exile. So in that treaty, Mexicans were supposed to keep their land rights, their civil rights, and any Mexicans that lived in those states had 2 options. They could either go to what was now going to become current Mexico, or they could stay where they were at, and they would become American citizens. So after this treaty happened, none of that was upheld. There was laws put in order where the Mexicans lost their land rights. They lost their civil rights. So fast forward, 1930s. Now there's Mexican families misplaced all over these territories because they lost all their rights. So they stay in these neighborhoods. And mind you, during this time, if you were Hispanic and you were caught walking by yourself, that was dangerous. Other communities, the cops, they would beat you because you were Mexican. Go back to your neighborhood. So because of that, these groups formed where people started hanging out. Some were car clubs, some were just groups, some were sports teams. But people started hanging out together in groups because you couldn't go anywhere alone. You had to go with 2 or 3 people or you could become a victim. So during this same time, World War II is going on. Well, there's a clothing ration, meaning that everybody needs to be saving their clothes so that they can give them to the soldiers. They need all the fabric they can get to build clothes for the soldiers. Well, at about the same time, Hispanics seen the jazz culture and they seen these zoot suits, and they had started wearing zoot suits, being pachucos. They had everything ironed to a crease, and it was like they felt like that was them. Like now they had something that was theirs. They made it theirs, because they were no longer Mexican. They were now descendants of the people that stayed in America, but now they had nothing that was theirs except for their neighborhood. And so that's also why these groups started clashing, because they couldn't leave their neighborhood, so you better not come into their neighborhood. And the stigmas, and just because you're white doesn't automatically make you ready to be attacked in these neighborhoods. but you have to have a reason to be there. And that stems all the way back to this in the 1930s, because if they left these neighborhoods to go to the jazz clubs, to go try to do things outside of these neighborhoods, they were scrutinized by the police. And so when you live with this violence, years of that, being told your own house isn't yours, all this, being treated like an outsider when you're fourth generations on this land, you're going to get a certain type of, animosity about you. Like, if you come into my neighborhood, we're going to fuck you up. Because if we leave this neighborhood, you're going to get us. And so that started going on at the same time as the zoot suits. Well, at this time, they outlawed the zoot suits. The zoot suit itself became illegal. And the Mexican Americans were not about to give up the one thing they had that was theirs. They felt like could not be taken from them. And that was their style. So they continued wearing them. Because of this, they were considered un-American. There was tons of news ads on the news labeling them violent because they were descendants of Aztecs. And so the Navy would get drunk and start going into these neighborhoods where these barrios are and start attacking any Mexican that they could find. Any Mexican American they seen, they would attack him. So what's going to happen? What does history say? These groups that were made to protect themselves start going into the other neighborhoods and start attacking white people they see, sailors. This is where the stigma comes from. If you're white, you can't go in this neighborhood, you can't go in that. And that is because of their prosecution. They were prosecuted like that. So they said, all right, don't come to where we are then, or there's going to be problems. So I think that gets lost too in a lot of translation nowadays. Like all these, I've met a lot of little fools out here that don't even know why they're dressed like that. They don't know why they got a crease. They don't know why it's got to be clean, why everything has to be firm, like starched. Because if you go outside of the house not female, it's like, me personally, I don't understand the skinny jeans stuff. Because me personally, I see it as, that's the culture. It's like your identity. That's who you are. The whole reason of wearing baggy clothes is to say that that's who you are. They can't change you.